I'd like to introduce Dr. Nancy Coogan, Superintendent of the Tukwila School District. I'm Heather Newman, and I'm the Early Learning Coordinator for our district. And we're here to talk with Nancy about her perspectives on early learning.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome. Nancy, could you share with us your personal and professional pre-K-3 story? What made you believe that a P-3 approach could help improve children's outcomes and prevent the opportunity gap in our district and in our region?
Yes, absolutely. So first and foremost, I did not attend pre-K as a student because I grew up in an environment that was very rich in literacy and mathematics and cognitive development, active play, and all the things that we know are what's best for our early learners. In the Tukwila School District, however, we have 80+ languages spoken. And this demographic is extremely challenging for our families, so I think it's almost our moral imperative to make sure that we offer this opportunity for students that are most marginalized, so that this is an equalizer for them as they enter into kindergarten.
What were your and Tukwila's starting points in developing a P3 approach?
Well, I had the experience of working with Kishel Toner in Seattle Public Schools. And I'd like to point that out because we've done work, and I've done work with Kathy Feldman for years. So really embracing that work and seeing how that has evolved and the importance of that literacy and early learning component is really, really critical. So having seen the Jumpstart program so successful in Seattle, having seen Kathy Feldman really work miracles in high poverty schools and schools with real challenging demographics, and seeing a change in teaching practices that impact student learning, that to me is of paramount importance. So that was kind of the seed that planted the importance of early learning in the Tukwila School District.
Nancy, where did you direct the district to first focus our energies as we started down this path? How did you determine what to prioritize?
Well, the early learning strands that existed were really separate, and we had a very misaligned system. So we had a little bit of this going on and a little bit of this going on. So part of the focus with the strategic plan is to get us, first of all, in an aligned system. So that was number one. Secondly, the strategic plan also helped us focus pre-K through 12th grade. So it wasn't this isolated early learning system or this isolated elementary system or high school system. So I think that that really is the foundation for how we do business now in the Tukwila School District. So everything that we do really filters into that strategic plan. Our budgeting process filters in, the school improvement plan filters in, so it has the ship going in the same direction. When I first got to Tukwila, I would probably argue that we were going in multiple directions, and it was really time to put alignment in place for the system, for the greater organization.
What would you say are your 3 next steps in implementing our district's pre-K through 3rd grade vision and plan?
First and foremost, we took 1 year to develop our strategic plan. And we call out early learning as a very important initiative in our strategic plan, with 15 out of 20 students who will enter kindergarten ready with having met or exceeded standard. That's first and foremost. So that took us 1 year, included our community partners, not only CBOs, but small and large businesses, school leaders, parents, district leaders at the central office, and of course myself. And that full year initiative really planted the seed for how we're going to do business moving forward. And early learning, of course, came to the forefront of that. We also work in partnership with our CBOs, and I know that you're working on numeracy initiative as well as a literacy initiative, which we will be launching with the Race to the Top P-3B grant this spring, working with Kathy Feldman. I also want to stress the importance of school leaders to participate in those initiatives. I think first and foremost, as the superintendent, it's important that I'm a part of that initiative as well. I think it's important that I learn alongside of the teachers, so I believe in modeling from the top. But I also believe that as school principals, they need to see what solid early learning professional development is, so that when they go into classrooms, that they are able to give teachers the descriptive feedback that they need to move this important initiative forward. That was number 2. And then I know we have also just started today implementing play and learn groups with our Somali English group starting at Tukwila Elementary.
Yes.
And we will be moving toward implementing a Burmese and English group coming up, as well as a Nepali and English group in the spring. So we're really excited about that. I did not get to attend today, but you told me that it was a great success. Yeah.
Great start, yes. And how was the P3 vision communicated and rolled out to the district and to the community?
Mm-hmm. So we have an early learning advisory team that meets regularly with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We also had the strategic plan, which we implemented over a full year. And because it is specifically called Out and Now Strategic Plan, we had to reach out to the community multiple times throughout the year. We had 60+ people participate on the planning process for our strategic plan. As I mentioned, small and large businesses, school leaders, community-based organizations. So really using that as the focus and focal point of the Early Learning Initiative, that took not only the full year, but multiple times out in the community, getting feedback on what they'd like to see. It was clear across the board that our community, all members of our community, wanted early learning focus, as well as our support from our city council. As you know, early learning is critical for the entire council in the Tukwila community, and they want to see us focus more on early learning for all children.
Nancy, how are you planning to sustain the pre-K through third grade work after the Race to the Top grant?
First and foremost, it's called that in the strategic plan, and my school board is a 5-0 board completely in support of early learning as an initiative. So I have the support of my bosses, the 5 of them, as well as our strategic plan. We also, you and I both know that when we talked about bringing early learning in, and specifically your position, that I said that this is a non-negotiable. It is automatically rolled up into the budget, so Race to the Top can come, can go, but early learning is staying. In addition to that, I think more importantly is the importance of a 0 to 5 program, because we know that pre-K and that kindergarten readiness is of paramount importance for our students. I believe in the importance of a 0 to 5 program, and we are moving toward that vision, as you know, in the Tukwila School District. So one of the things that I am really focusing on is this community idea of womb to rest. And so we take care of children when they are born into our community, and we take care of even adults before they lie to rest. So it's this whole concept of cultivating community for one Tukwila, ensuring that we have this intergenerational approach. I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that's important. We are now building multiple buildings on the International Boulevard. One of the buildings is a senior citizen center where we will have housing for senior citizens. And so my vision around that, as you know, because we presented to the City Council, is how do we use senior citizens as a stimulus with all their infinite wisdom to help support early learners. So ideally, I would love a 0 to 5 building next to my senior citizen building so we can have this community approach to raising children. What I'm really looking at is building a community where everyone's needs are met. And I currently am working with philanthropists. I am working with large businesses in the Tukwila and surrounding areas. I'm working with hospitals for medical care. And right now, we are coming to a very critical point where you will start to see some very exciting things happening over the next 6 months in Tukwila. And I can't unveil everything quite yet, but it means as a superintendent, it means that this is very important to me, right? As a superintendent in this district, you wear so many hats. I eulogize when people die in my Burmese community because they expect me to be there. I go to the housing authority when families have bed bugs that are just rampant in their apartments, you know. I have to be there when children get kicked out of their apartments and they're homeless, and I'll get a call. It's not uncommon for me to get calls for all these different types of things. So you're really this pastor of a community. So because this is so important to me, Cashel, and because I see the way some students come to school and the living conditions that some of our families have, I do believe it's my moral imperative to make a difference.
I think it's important that we're talking not just about the academic development of children, that we're looking also at social, emotional,
wraparound services.
Looking at the role of the family in developing,
and even more than that, Heather, I think the importance of healthcare.
Absolutely.
When we look at the infrastructure where we're really going as a district, which is at really an infant stage, but when we look at infrastructures, what my community, this community, our community really needs is that complete wraparound service, not only the academics, but yes, of course, we have people that come to us, our children come to us with significant trauma, refugee trauma, immigrant trauma, homelessness, one school with 22% homeless. I mean, that's unheard of. So we really have to focus on the social emotional care of children. We really have to focus on active play with children. We really need to focus on full medical and dental care for children. All of these things are what raises the village, right? It just can't be sheer academics raising children. So I think that those wraparound services are critical to the success and the development of an early learning center and of the development of children in the Tukwila School District. I also want to know that I want my communities to stay in Tukwila. I don't want them to leave because they're out of housing or leave because they don't have the services, and that's what we see with transient populations. So that's the purpose of it too, because I know if I have kids from pre-K through 12th grade, I can get them across the stage. So that's the ultimate goal, right, is getting them across the stage. So I know if I keep them there, I can make it happen because we have really smart people working on behalf of children. It's just building the community around, the infrastructure around. That's my approach anyway.
And then I also know that you're a new grandmother and you're especially aware of brain-based research. Could you talk a little bit about how that is also something that I think is really at the forefront of your mind when you're thinking about this work?
Right, so as we focus and we look at the iLab work and the work from the University of Washington, the brain-based research, it's very, very clear of the what children actually can do, and the development of the brain and the activities that really stimulate the development of the child, right? And so when I read things like The Scientist in the Crib, it definitely stimulates a lot of thinking around this idea of active play and cognitive development and social emotional development. And they're very specific in strategies that we can do. So when I look at my demographic, our demographic, and 80+ languages and the significant poverty in this community, I think it's really important that we have quality facilities that really focus on that cognitive development, that social emotional development, that active play, and the things that we know really grow children and prepare them for pre-K and then of course K.
I have a question about, I guess, sort of infrastructure and financing and funding in terms of, I think that the research has clearly shown us that if we invest in early learning, it will pay off down the road tenfold, and that the investment we make early on will save us money, for example, in special education and those kind of things.
Prevention, not intervention.
Exactly. Yeah. But I guess my question is also around the navigation of when you sort of have that overlap where you haven't yet seen the fruits of your investment from early learning and you're still needing to provide, for example, those special education services, etc. And so you're sort of needing to invest in both until those children that you invested in
catch up.
And I'm just kind of wondering how you navigate that, if that makes sense. How you find the capacity, both financially and human capital and all of those things.
And without burning out your staff, right?
Yeah.
Because a big piece of this community, or any community where we have challenging demographics, is the wellness of our staff on top of the wellness of our community. And I think I can't state enough about that, because we are asking, the work is so hard. And when you work in this community, we are asking our staff to do what's really not doable, right? We're asking them, when you're exhausted after working a 70-hour week, you need to reach out your hand and lift someone up, right? That's that cultivating a community. So when you talked about while you're waiting for the system to catch up, I think we over-identify special education students for ELL population, for our ELL population. I've already identified that as a former problem in Tukwila. And so I think that we have some refugee and immigrants. This goes back to schooling in the schoolhouse. I think we have some immigrant refugee students who come to us who are absolutely brilliant in their home language, right? So how do we really navigate that system on top of everything else, that system, to really have the level of expectations for those kids, so we're not sacrificing their academics, right? And I'm not sure that answered your question, but I just think that I think you have to stay the course. And I think that the course is not for everybody. Working in a Tukwila is not for everybody. I mean, I think it's the best job in the world, but it's not for everybody. It's exhausting work, but so rewarding, so rich, right? You know, when you get a simple thank you because you were able to provide something for a family, they're just so appreciative of every little thing that we do, right? You don't have the challenge of privilege, which brings so many things to an unfair advantage. When we look at a student who, we have to give the teachers the skills and the strategies that they need to raise the level of excellence in children. And when we look at a student and we are really baffled, or we just go to, they're just not getting it, special ed, that's our fault, that's on us, right? So it's really critical that we bring in experts to look at the student, and I consider Lilia an expert in ELL, and just show the teacher what to do so that this student is successful. And we need to invest in the teachers, first and foremost, to make sure we've got the best and brightest in front of these little ones for them to succeed. Because if we're compromising that, then we're compromising what we're saying to be true, right? So absolutely we need to invest in teacher corps. And I'm really excited to hear that I know that universities now are really looking at that seriously and really upping their ante. And I'd like to see more of that moving forward, yes.
I think it's also important, and I know it sounds like you were talking a little bit about this, that I think when I look at, for example, our Play and Learn program that we're getting up and running,
Yes.
we really have, and I think this might be a term I'm borrowing from you, Cashel, but we have emerging leaders among our families. And I love the idea of building in pathways. So if we have people who are already in our community, who have children in our schools, who are interested in the field of education, to provide some really logical, clear pathways if they want to pursue, and whether that's a CDA, whatever that the path is, and that might be in partnership with the community college or with the university, but we have these family members with the potential in our communities, and it's just really powerful. I think that's got to be a necessary piece. Exactly.
I mean, look at our Somali. Do you have Somali storytelling? Yeah. I mean, that's brilliant,
awesome.
right? And to see kids engaged and active in literacy, right? And having lunch and the animation that she brings to her storytelling. I mean, there's nothing like that.
We've actually lost a couple of our Play and Learn facilitators to the larger system, which is kind of good, right? They're becoming special ELLIAs.
Yeah.
And figuring out that pathway and becoming interpreters and other things, which is kind of neat. We have to keep finding those emerging leaders, but it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Another, through the Race to the Top, we have provided an ELL endorsement. We wrote it into our Race to the Top. So we have teachers getting their ELL endorsement, and we are paying for their education. So they'll be dually endorsed, which is a real important piece working in this demographic. And this year we started an ELL leadership academy, I'd say it was. And so I'm a part of that leadership academy. Heather's a part of that leadership academy. So we have school leaders and myself learning about best practices for our ELL students. And it's real practical, it's really applicable to what we're doing in Tukwila, and they really customize what we have do for the university, Heritage University. And so that, I think, has been a great partnership as well. I think at one of my elementary schools, Cascade View, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 70% of their staff is ELL endorsed as well as K-8.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think that might be something that we need to really look at long term. I do think that that makes a difference for serving this population. Yeah.
Can I ask you guys a question? Are you a Head Start provider or ECAP provider?
Both.
Yep.
Okay, and how long have you had those programs?
ECAP for longer than I've been in the district. And
Is
it's
your new Head Start provider?
as of last year, so we're part of 187.
Okay.
So my first board meeting, this
Yeah.
is fun, my first board meeting they said, we need a space for ECAP, for Head Start.
For Head Start.
And I said, okay, and we need it by tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. Honest to goodness.
I know that's how they go.
Honest to goodness, this is my first board meeting, right? And I'm like, I don't even know the principal's names yet. It wasn't that, but I was like, we have to do this, right? Because you can't lose those spots, it's so critical. So we made it happen. But it was like, did cause a little bit of stress on the system.
But to Nancy's point, you know, I think that the willingness is there to
Yes.
be ECAP and Head Start providers, and we already have 3 programs going now.
Yes.
But space is such a limitation. I mean, we are fully enrolled, we have long wait lists, and we even have a backlog beyond the wait list. You know, just the applications come in so quickly. I mean, the kids are not being served. They're here, they're in our community. Play and Learn can fill the gap a little bit, but it's just it's a drop, and it's, you know, it's once a week. It's powerful, but it can't be the only.
Hence the community,
Yeah.
hence the community development. That's what's going to really make it happen. That infrastructure from womb to rest.
Yeah, especially when you think of the expansion piece and those ECAP programs going from part day to full day model. So then
Right.
if you're doing AM PM model,
We just
then-
had this conversation yesterday.
Yeah.
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
Then the space becomes a really big deal.
Yes. Yes. It's an exciting time to be in early learning.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
What do you think about the birth to 5? And I mean, you're part of the educators, you know, right?
Yeah, I think
Understood.
that it's absolutely critical to get in even before 5,
Pre-K, yeah.
before 3.
Yeah.
You know, I think that you really miss out on some really sensitive periods prenatal through through 3.
And how did they choose that site?
Do you know about, I don't know how much you know about Educare.
I do.
You do. Perfect.
How did they choose that site? Because if you were to do a needs assessment
Uh,
of this area, including White Center, because I know Providence Hospital did a needs assessment, which is why Providence landed in my office. They said, we did a needs assessment, and Tukwila is the neediest community in South King County. So when they landed in my office, and then I go to visit the Educare, and that's a stunning site,
Yeah.
and doing great things.
there was actually 2 sites that were originally in the running for Educare in Washington, and the other one was in Yakima. And White Center ended up winning out. And I know that there was a White Center Early Learning Initiative that happened. I'm not sure of like what pre-White Center Early Learning Initiative, like what really landed them in that particular spot.
Yeah.
But I know that they did a lot of kind of community building, community outreach, figuring out, you know, what needs to happen in the community for Educare to be there. I think there was certainly some lessons learned in that process, because, you know, there was, in any kind of community building in that process, you know, it's easy to step on toes, and it's easy to damage, you know, relationships in different ways. When you've got somebody like Gates coming in, and, you know, you're building a building, and
Right.
you know, and a lot of change was happening there too, because the Greenbridge housing site was being changed over, you know, so there was a lot of folks that were living in that community that then had to move, and now are coming, you know, they didn't necessarily come back. I mean, once they're gone, but, you know, there's that kind of rebuilding of that process too. So I don't know, you know, how they chose that particular site, but I know that there was a lot of, you know, thought that went into that particular community.
I'm just curious, and the only reason why I know about the needs assessment in this whole area, including White Center, was because Providence approached me on it. They were going to invest significant funds in a different community. And this is how I met Sister Suzanne, who just fell into my lap about the needs of Tukwila and their mission about helping the poor, right? So I just didn't know what the background was for that. Have you been to that facility?
And it's a self-transport too, so it doesn't live within, you know, school district boundaries, because we get kids from Seattle, you know, and Tukwila, and you know, further south in Highline. So, you know, the kids come from different places depending on the family's needs and where they're working.
It was interesting because when we were there, we did not even know that we were a part of the Educare system, and I'm the superintendent. I had no idea. So you have a new director there, very nice. She gave
Kelly,
us a
who came from
beautiful-
PSCSD.
And so
Or I guess
we
still
talked
is
about
there.
how we could do some more reach out to Tukwila, and we would have to provide the busing, I understand, is that correct?
Well, Educare itself is a self-transport, so the parents bring their kids there, like on their way to work.
Well, for us, we'd have to provide busing, yeah.
But I know that she's working on their, the P-3 campus with, you know, in that community, so.
Nice.
It's, you know, trying to align that, thinking about systems alignment, and what does that mean for community providers, and what does that mean for, you know, other folks that are coming in from different places.
Right.
How do you align those, meet the needs of the families while you're aligning the systems from multiple perspectives?
Yes.
But there's a lot of really great stuff. I mean, thinking about research, you know, thinking about, you know, best practices, and figuring out what that looks like in a classroom setting, and being able to share what we know at Educare, you know, to the greater P3 world is a really great thing. I know one of the projects I did there was with early achievers, and working really closely with DEL and piloting what does it mean for Head Start and ECAP to be a part of that early achiever system, because it wasn't built for Head Start and ECAP programs. It was built for licensed childcare, and Head Start and ECAP are totally different animals than licensed childcare. So it was a little bit of a rough ride, but we really did a lot of forging in terms of being able to you know, have the channels in the system be available and accessible to Head Start and ECAP.
It's an absolute beautiful facility, amazing, really amazing.
I think, and so one of the things I'm working on right now is a communications, marketing, and fundraising plan for Educare, and doing some research on how do we engage. You were talking about, you know, businesses and philanthropy. Is how do we doing some research into engaging the young tech sector in King County, and especially engaged in early learning funding, because it's not something that's really tapped into. So when we think about,
I don't even know what that is, I'm sorry.
Yes, well, I mean, just thinking about tech companies,
Oh,
you know, there's
okay.
a lot of tech companies.
In general.
In general,
Okay,
and then there's a lot of young folks with a lot of money that you know, that don't necessarily invest in early learning. So we're just doing some research into, you know, is this a possibility?
Yeah.
There's an Educare that's just opening in Silicon Valley, and they, you know, you think about the money that's in that region.
Right.
Yet they're having a really hard time engaging philanthropists and, you know, and funders to invest in the Educare in Silicon Valley. So there feels like there's this kind of divide there, but so we're trying to figure out how do we bridge that?
Yeah. Huh.
So it should be interesting.
We're all trying that. We're all trying the same thing in some respects. Well, I mean, I come up with roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, right? So, well, I'm willing to learn from your mistakes, and I'll share my mistakes. Well, anything else Heather, thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
was just
Thank you for
great.
giving us so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.